Hey, what's going on, guys? It's me, Train Man, and we are here in unprecedented speed. I think it's like 7 or 8 times. And we're gonna need it because there's quite a bit of footage, and I noticed I did not manage to get this thing down to below, what's it called? Below 20 minutes. Okay, so real quick though, I noticed this hole, just a little space I missed, and so I got this sign, and I found out you can write on it. So now we have a little tourist destination called Pit of Death. Because why not, right? So the first job today was to complete this line of trackage, and not very hard, but I was trying to work it out. You know, I was trying to think ahead and figure out where the terrain features would go. I already knew some of the stuff, but you know, it's the kind of thing where I really couldn't know if it was all going to pan out great. And if you'll notice there isn't a runaround loop or anything, so I may have to add some to that. Presumably you'd probably back down it, because it's going to be quite a downgrade. You'd probably back down it and then drive forwards back up it, and that'd just be serviced by the passenger train, so nothing really hefty. And by passenger trains, they're more like mixed trains, really. There's the wood train and there's the mixed train, and I've discussed this before, I believe. But the 2-foot gauge has a life of its own, because that's just how this works. Alright, so we've got the track connected, and I'm just trying to figure out what I'm doing here. And so I grab another section of ground, just the ground, and I build this line straight out, and then I fill in the area very, very quickly. I'm not sure if it's going to look any better on video, but I think I've hit a point where diminishing returns comes in for the speed. Like, at 4 times it kind of looked cool, and it made things, you know, not so bad, and now it's just like, wow, this takes forever. And so I had to check this for gradient, and then I had to give it a proper gradient, which turned out to be, I think, 1.3 something in the end. I went back and forth on trying to figure it out. And then I wanted to find the gradient of this, and that's a little bit too much, so we're going to have to rework some of the trackage over there. Either way, I build out this line, and this is our sort of buffer. I think I've got my strategy for how I'm going to be building all this kind of track. Okay, so we do this a lot. Be prepared. I also make a dumb decision up here, which actually does kind of pay off. It was still a dumb decision, but it worked out. Anyways, I've got my strategy worked out for how this is all going to be built when I'm building track directly on top of ground instead of bringing ground to track. And that's why I'm going to have to use the plane tool first, which is what this is, basically. The plane tool, as in by name, doesn't exist. But this is my replacement for the plane tool. Or, you know, it's what I wished was the plane tool. Alright, so oops, screwed that up there. Ended up making that a straight line. It worked out. And that's going to be, so use the plane tool, make the ground flat, lay the track, or have the track sitting on top of it, and then add your interesting terrain features there. So the trick, or the thing that's going to come about, because I have this flat, don't worry, the game's just frozen. There we go. The thing that's going to be happening is it's not going to really look like you're climbing. Although, with the river as a point of reference, which we build in later, you'll see, it does in fact look like you're climbing. Alright, so I have to do this, and this of course takes a while. If you'll notice, it's a little bit jerky because it froze every time I decided to do it, and then I decided to do a bunch at once and was just waving the cursor around. That didn't work. And then, once I get through all of them twice, which is how many you have to do, I decided to go back and do it a 3rd time, because there was still some striations that were, you know, maybe not visible, but might have showed up when I decided to edit the terrain further, and, you know, started screwing things up. Started screwing the looks of things up. So, then I decided to copy-paste this section. Not my greatest idea, but not really a terrible one either. Because I paste the thing, and now here's me waiting. I'm gonna stop saying waiting. Anyways, so there was a very long pause here where I waited for the whole section to come in at once. Because as we've found out, TS12 does not like editing terrain. So, there it is. And then I decide, okay, well that was fun, let's do it one more time. So here I am waiting again. At this time, I just sort of went off and did other things. It sat here for... If this is 8 times speed, I'm not sure. Is it 8 or 7? Either way, it took a long time. I sat here for quite a while. Sort of working on all that. Did this thing just stop playing? Okay, now it's going to be too long. I clicked on it. It's 8 times. I shouldn't have checked. I regret my decision. Anyways, I do it over here as well. Although I made it its own section, so that it was a little bit more manageable. Flatten out that. There was a better way to do that for sure, but... I'm just sort of mousing around now. If there's a point where I'm pausing, I'm either stopping to explain someone who's looking over my shoulder, or explain to someone, or I'm just sort of brainstorming, which does happen quite a bit. I've figured out a lot of what I want to do, but not all of it yet. So, I make that with a little divot, and then decide to do it with a thing instead. And it takes me a few attempts to get this thing set out, as you can see. And I went, no, that's not good. And then off the map. There we are. So, then I decided to do the rest of this river here. And I'm really not sure how this is all going to work out, because I am not going to be using a river spline, because they look terrible. I'm just going to have to be editing the terrain. We're either going to have a lot of waterfalls, or we're going to be using a lot of river sort of rapids texture. Also, I decided to add a river here. And that means I'm going to be tearing up the road and moving it towards the river, so I don't have to do more work with the trees. This attaches to the river over there. You know, I thought it looked weird that other river sort of drove off into the middle of nowhere and just dead-ended, probably a lake or something in the blank space, and went, no, you know what, I can do better than that. It would obviously continue through and we'd see it again, so here it is. It's heading towards the mountains now, so thankfully I don't have to model where it came from completely. I didn't do the other side of the... I just realized, did I not do the other side of the trees? Because that was kind of dumb. That's a cool bridge we're going to have to use in the future. Okay, yeah, no, I do the other side of trees. Good job, me. So I plan to use that bridge in the future in an area that we haven't yet built. It's kind of a small... Well, it's on the 2-foot gauge. Everything's small. You know, it's... Something that would be a hill is otherwise a mountain. Or, you know, something that would otherwise be a hill is a mountain. And something that would otherwise be a stream is a serious river crossing. That wasn't it. And this is just the Pit of Death, of course. I decided to use the bridge here, but we don't actually finish out this section until probably next episode. Next episode, though, I want to get all of the base trackage done. Okay, so quick cut to here. That was kind of jarring, wasn't it? Quick cut to over here where we're going to finish up the terraining for the beach. Or not the terraining. We're going to finish up the texturing. The terraining's been done. We still haven't done any of the fiddly bits, but I'm, of course, saving that more than likely for after the op session. Because fiddly bits is time-consuming, and it doesn't do... You don't do a huge section at once, more than likely. When I was doing the line that's already done there, that sort of wiggly one you'll see that we're connecting to, I did it from signal to signal, like a chunk at a time. It's not the sort of thing you necessarily sit down and do at once, because it's a lot of work. And also, when you get to the fiddly bits like that, a lot of times, you know, some of the little interesting stuff you'll get done first, like the Pit of Death over there. But sometimes it's more a situation of you'll get burned out, your creativity, you'll run out of creativity. Alright, so again, as I was saying, I have not done the fiddly bits over here. I'm not planning on doing the fiddly bits over here yet. Not people, I'm not big on putting people down, but we're gonna have to do the houses and the mansions. There are gonna be a handful of mansions out here. There's gonna be probably not too much stuff actually on the beach. Oh, I was just checking on that station. I wanted to see what it looked like. I downloaded off the DLS. sort of interesting looking. Anyways, yeah, but fiddly bits are going to include trees, grass, houses, anything we haven't done yet. I need to do the telegraph lines for the rest of, well, everything. I might do that on camera. I don't see why I wouldn't. And we've only got half of that done, and then we come into uncharted territory, and then we start working on the actual terrain, and that's what the rest of this episode is about. So, that's it for me. No, I'm kidding. I'm not going to leave you with 8 times speed terraining. However, this is this. We have to come around a hill here. Again, I built the track, and now I have to build a reason why the track goes the way it does. The river doesn't change elevation, so that's the big piece. I just decided to come over here and do this mountain first, or hill, really. Do this hill first, and then I have to connect it over to here. And something that always gets me, the reason I do a lot of the sort of touch-up textures first is because if you layer everything with a single color, you can't see the grid anymore. And the grid is really helpful for figuring out what the hell you're doing in terms of terrain. So I come over here with a, basically what amounts to an erase tool, but it's a copy-paste tool of just the texture of the blank block, because there is no longer a blank texture in TS12. There's one in 06, but oh well. So we build these lines of hills, basically. We build this thing that would prevent you from running the train through this area, basically. We're building line of sight blockers and track blockers. And as a side note, we're also building interesting terrain features, but that's, of course, much, much less important. No, of course. We're not trying to build interesting terrain features, we're trying to get the job done. With any means necessary. Now, I do make an attempt to make it look good. If I wanted a line of sight blocker, I'd put a wall or something. Or, build a mountain like I am. I like mountains. Or, well, Weibold would not let me call these mountains, so I'll call them hills. Anyways, we again come along here, and I was on the fence about what to do for a lot of it. And it just sort of, it's like a puzzle. So you start with one area, and you know what to do with that one area, and you put that together. And you have your edge piece. And your edge piece, okay, well, what could connect to this edge piece? Well, this sort of looks good next to it. Let's attach that there. And so I attach this line of mountains, and I decide, okay, well, I've got this area. I mean, it's sloped, but I can make it look good, and I can make it look like a sort of drainage basin into this lake here. And I don't know where the lake would go, but it doesn't really matter. It just goes somewhere. It goes off. It may not have an exit. A lot of these kettle lakes don't have an exit, but this may not be a kettle lake. It's not really deep enough. So here we go with the actual tools. So lower the, I'm going to in a second lower the water. The water is my rock, okay? The water is the thing that tells me what level I'm supposed to be building this river at. And there's honestly no other way to tell other than breaking out the terrain height tool all the time. So I spent time laying that river down, and now I'm building the valley around it, because every time I poke into it with a really big tool, I get a river that's a lot wider than what I want. And trying to clean that up just makes a mess, as we've seen in a bunch of the other river builds. And I'm mostly using terrain down here, and I plateau this out so that the river is just above the water surface. The river texture, I mean. And this area ends up looking pretty good in terms of terrain, but you guys will see that in a minute. So first thing is, we try to skirt the edge of the tracks as much as we do deep in the river, because, well, I don't want this big blank space. I want there to be a continuous slope. And this is something I've talked about probably on the podcast as well, but I've talked about it on the zombie train before. That was an accident. I've talked about it on the zombie train. I've talked about it with Weibold. He was giving me help with building mountains and building sort of shelves for when you're building like a shelf for the train to run on a think like Cumbres Pass. And here's me making the river a decent size. We're gonna have another hill up on the other side of this. This river created its own little valley of ours. and I'm trying to make it as natural looking and as wide as possible. I'm taking inspiration from Jader, actually, on a different portion of this map which is not connected yet, and I'll connect when I get to it. On a different portion of this map, there is a area that's similar to this, except the tracks also go over the river, and the river stays at the same height. So this river is cut through basically a hill, and that's the way it is. It stays at the same level, more or less. Well, this is train, so it does stay at the same level. And I'm hugging up along the edge of the track there, and I'm bringing it in a little bit, and then I think, is the rest of the video trees? Game locked up here. Come back, still trying to figure out what to do. The river's okay. I decided to give it another go along with the brush. Oh, that's right, I work on over here. So I clear out all the green here, and I start building the mountains on this side of the track. Or, hills. Sorry, hills. This is not the mountain division, this is the coastal division. Technically. Where would it turn into the mountain division? It turns into the mountain division at Providence as well, although technically it's already in the mountain division. Oh no, that's mountain division. Troy isn't. Well, okay, the 2-foot gauge is its own railroad, so it doesn't really matter what division it's in of the standard gauge. The standard gauge, of course, is broken into 3 divisions. That'd be the coastal division, the mountain division, and the plains division, or otherwise just known as the eastern division, which is where parts of the 3-foot gauge are, as well as most of the grain production on the map. The mountain division is, of course, where the passes, plural, are, and that's where most of the narrow gauge, 3-foot, is. Looks like the 2-foot gauge is also in the mountain division, but it probably shouldn't be, because it's not very mountainous over here. We're in foothills. We're approaching the mountains. It's a little bit less than rocky. This isn't Tardis Pass. None of them really are. And I think Weibold is going to do a lot of the terrain handling for the mountain division. I haven't seen Jader build straight up mountains, although he's very, very good at building things. I might want to call him our standard gauge master, so if you heard that, Jader, feel free to accept the name. Weibold, you're our narrow gauge master, of course. And, I don't know what I'd be. I need to give myself a title. If I'm giving everyone else pompous titles, I might as well take one for myself. I am the map maker. I guess. Well, Weibold doesn't, I know. Jader does. He works from a map. But I'm pretty sure he got the idea from me. And I'm not saying that to be arrogant. I'm saying that as a legitimate statement. So, I am the map maker. I'm the one who makes the paper maps. Or digital in this case. And in the case of the next route I'm going to, Proto-Lance, I guess the term would be. Okay, so we decided to do trees here, but I don't finish. At this point, I was like, man, I'm running a little bit long here. It's like 3 and, edging on 3 hours. So, let me, just do most of these trees and then leave it off. I can't believe at 3 times speed, or at 8 times speed, treeing is still this slow. How do I deal with it in 1 time speed, in our reality? Also, yeah, the lakes need extra little, fiddly bits, extra, not texture, but it needs extra scenicking. It needs the micro work done on it. Of course, the macro work on this area is almost all done. That includes the trees, that includes the ground, or the big grass texture, the one that goes over everything. And most of the other stuff. I haven't done a lot of the micro on this area. The only place that's had micro done on it is Waterville Island. Oh, game locked up. Come on, just waiting. Alright. I make it down about until where the switchback starts, and then I go, you know what, this is enough. I'll work on the rest later, but next week is going to be hopefully finishing the terrain to Providence. Trayman out.